Now, there are sundry sources of taxation for the government. They range from VAT, VAT to import duties. But the government has headache meetings its expenditures due to inability to take all the taxes available in the economy. Here we talk about the incidents of tax avoidance and some waivers in some cases. So how can the tax system improve to help our public finance structures? Now, this is our focus today. We're all on Business Nigeria. Welcome. I'm Tolulope Ogunjobi. Many thanks for staying with us. Now, the federal government has inaugurated a committee to review current tax laws to help increase the country's tax fortunes as oil incomes drops further. This is the first time efforts will be made to update Nigeria's tax policy, which was put in place in 2012. Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio is 5%, and it is one of the lowest in the world. The committee has 4 weeks to conclude this assignment.
Review the national tax policy document, recommend the list of tax laws and regulations that need to be reviewed or amended, make other suggestions on ways to facilitate effective implementation of the document, recommend policy to ensure interagency cooperation between Federal and Inland Revenue Service and other revenue-generating agencies towards enhancing the IGR of the federal government, expand the treaty network of Nigeria to include our major trading partners and review existing double taxation agreements. Ensure that tax laws are revised from time to time to minimize avoidable hardships to taxpayers.
Taxation is the oxygen of any country, but it all begins with the tax policy. So we assure you that we will try all that is within our power in order to deliver within the short period. I will confess that it's really challenging to do this within 4 weeks, but we'll try the best we can in order not to disappoint you and the nation. So we look forward to maximum cooperation from all members so that we can do this nation proud and chart a course that will set us on an irreversible progress of change.
Now, taxation forms a major support base for government activities. The Nigerian government's budget of 6.07 trillion naira makes provision for tax revenue of 4.9 trillion. Now, this represents almost 80% of the budget overhead. Well, here in the studio with me is Taiwo Oyedele. He is the head of tax and regulatory services, PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, joining me in the studio to shed more light on these issues. Thanks for joining us on Business Nigeria.
Thank you, Toto.
I think I'm going to start with Nigeria's tax policy. Can we just do an overview of what we have and what we intend to achieve with reviews like this, just like the minister just said that we're reviewing the policy? What did we used to have before now?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think for every country around the world, Nigeria inclusive, usually your tax policies will drive tax legislation. You say, what do we want to do? What do we want to achieve as a country? And then on that basis, you enact laws. Now, the laws that have been enacted is what will be administered by the revenue agencies. And these three legs combined is what forms the tax system. Now, in Nigeria, for a very long time, we didn't have any documented policy. So which meant that different people were doing things as they thought fit. Sometimes those things are in direct opposite to themselves. Most times those things are counterproductive. So Nigeria decided to do a study. And that was a very long process from 2002 all the way until 2010. And we had something we call the National Tax Policy. Now, this National Tax Policy was approved by the Federal Executive Council as well as NEC, which meant that all the state authorities in Nigeria also signed off. And they said, well, this is what we want. And it was actually a very brilliant document, in my view. But fast forward 6 years after, we haven't implemented it. In fact, many of the policymakers today and our leaders, politicians, are not even aware there's a national tax policy. So we continue to do the direct opposite of what that thing says we shouldn't do. For example, multiplicity of taxes. Yeah. That national tax policy is very clear that we shouldn't introduce taxes that are similar. So if somebody is paying more than one tax on the same tax base, that's double taxation. In some cases, even more than two. It's multiple. You also find things like, that tax policy says we should focus less on direct taxes, such as personal income tax, company income tax, because really people don't like to pay tax on their income. But we should focus more on indirect taxes, such as VAT. So the idea wasn't that you should reduce personal income tax and not replace it with anything. It was a question of, it's really more difficult to avoid indirect taxes such as VAT, because whenever you buy anything that is liable to VAT, they add VAT on top of it. The only way you can stop paying VAT is to stop consumption. Whereas for income tax, you can hide your income and not show government everything that you have, especially for those who are not in the formal sector. So essentially, that was what we've always had, but because we never implemented it, we couldn't even identify areas of improvement. So what government is now saying is, let's take a step back and look at this document again. Is it still fit for purpose? Are there changes we need to make? Are there things we need to remove? Are there things we need to add? And then on top of all of that, we need to then think about how to really implement it.
Interesting. Now, we're looking at the budget now with analysis. A lot is expected from the tax net, as in looking at even the new tax boss from Lagos is an incident and now going to the federal government and all that. But don't you think this is looking too high, as in Nigerians are already crying? And at the time, I think I heard of about over 300,000 companies not complying. I think that was the first report I heard from the FRS. Why do we have it this bad, and how do we get people into the tax net?
So actually, the number of companies that are not complying are more than 300,000. So 300 were just the one they found, within a short period of time. So that there are probably almost 1 million companies that are not complying. And even for individuals too, it's not any better. Nationwide, of all the 36 states, we have only 10 million people registered in the tax net with tax authority. Nigeria is almost 180 million people. Workforce is over 77 million, but only 10 million are even registered. Not that they are all paying taxes, registered. Look at VAT rate, and the rate is very low. So if I then take that to your question about the budget, the amount of money we budgeted from tax, recession, and no unemployment, how do you reconcile all of that? And the simple thing I'll tell you is, unfortunately, we haven't been a people that were paying taxes. So the person that wasn't paying taxes before at all, even if he has the person to pay 1%, is going to react negatively, because 1% is more than 0%. The idea is that government really does not need to introduce new taxes. What we just need to do is to collect existing taxes. Take VAT, for example. Compliance rate is only 12%. So there's 88% of transactions and liable persons in Nigeria who are not complying with VAT law. So even though the rate is low at 5%, imagine if you can get 50% of people to comply. The income goes up by multiples. So essentially, that budget is not unrealistic. It's just that, unfortunately, it's all coming at the same time. When economic activities are going down, we have issues with exchange rates. Some manufacturers cannot import input. They are closing down factories. At the presidential dialogue meeting that we had last week, I think it was last week now, the president of MAN was saying that 50 of their members at least have closed shop. Manufacturers cannot get material, so they're not producing, and that's unemployment. Many of the states are owing salaries. So is it the staff that did not even collect salary that will now pay tax? So unfortunately, we're trying to collect more taxes at a time that the economy is really struggling. But I think it's a good crisis that we should not waste. We should use that opportunity to reform the system. And as things begin to pick up again, we'll see the result from a tax point of view.
Interesting. And that brings me to this question before I go to, I remember, I know I've asked you this before at the time when I had the opportunity to speak to you, was about the June FAC, that's the federal allocation and the revenue and all that. And there was improvement. And the minister came out to say, oh, lots of monies from tax and non-oil sector. How did that come up all of a sudden?
Yeah, so that was an interesting fact, actually. So in June, which is about 2 months ago now, we heard that the FRS collected a lot of money, almost 700 billion. And they said, wow, about 70% of this came from non-oil. Nigeria has now diversified. We don't rely on oil. I say, well, that's not complete truth. We are not saying everything we should say. Now, we should bear in mind that based on the tax laws, companies have up to 6 months after their financial year end date to file returns and pay their taxes. You could stagger it a little bit, but technically 6 months after year end. Majority of companies in Nigeria, including all banks, all insurance companies, and many other organizations have December 31st as their year-end date. Okay. So historically, you see the trend. June is always the month we collect the highest amount of tax because that's when those companies are paying their taxes. So June is an exception, not the rule. And it would be wrong for us on the premise of what we collected in June to create a false impression and expectation. Because it's going to be dangerous. I heard people saying that now the governors can pay all the salaries and they'll stop owing. I bet it. You will not get anything close to that in July, in August, in September. So, but I think if at the end of the day we look at the whole year and we see that there's improvements in non-oil tax revenue, then we should celebrate that. But not something you fix overnight and say because of June we fixed the problem.
Interestingly, before we go on the break, now how do we know incidents of tax evasion? It's everywhere. It's everywhere. How do we deal with tax evasion?
Yeah, I think it's fundamental to find out why people don't want to pay tax. Truth of the matter is, anywhere in the world, in the US, in the UK, in Germany, nobody is excited paying tax because you feel it's your resources and you're partying with it, and you don't get direct benefit when you pay tax. But everybody also agrees that for government to operate, for the society to be what we want it to be, we must pay taxes. So when people evade, there are a combination of factors. One, and the most fundamental, is when they cannot see the outcome of the taxes that have been paid before. When you read on the pages of newspapers and you see billions being stolen away, stuck in Dubai, in Europe, in tax haven, it's discouraging. I would say to myself, out of my only 1,000 naira income, why should I give 100 naira to someone who still is on top of the billions? You can't see infrastructure, not enough of it. People generate their own water, provide their own electricity, provide security, and they're asking themselves, this is the role of government. Why should I pay tax on top of all of that? And also you have enforcement that is very weak. You have laws that are not very clear. They're ambiguous, such that even people who want to pay can't find it easy to pay. And the ease of paying taxes is extremely complicated in Nigeria. So this combination of factors are the reason why tax evasion is very high in Nigeria.
Now, let's go on this short break now, and we'll be back. I'll still be having Tawi Dele here to give insight into issues around the tax system in Nigeria. Stay with us on Business Nigeria. We'll be right back. You're on to Business Nigeria, and I have in the studio Taiwo Oyedele, who's the head of tax and regulatory services of PricewaterhouseCoopers, giving insight into issues surrounding tax in Nigeria. We know we definitely have to diversify, looking at other sectors. At this time, when the price of crude oil continues to dwindle, well, hovering around $50, $48. Let's see how it goes. Now, we just talked about tax evasion before we went on that short break. But we talked about, I said 300,000, which still counts. You said even close to 1 million. Why can't government fish out these tax offenders for punishment if they need to be punished? Why can't they do that? And let us know that, oh, so people are not paying, because I know of the oil and gas sector, when the IOCs are not doing what they're supposed to do, the host communities and all that. But that doesn't happen in case of tax. Why is the government not just getting hard on this on them?
We have been very lazy, and that's the honest truth. As a country, we have been extremely lazy because there was free-flowing money technically from the ground, and so we didn't see any reason why we needed to focus on tax, because collecting tax is not easy. Yeah, it's a lot of effort to collect tax. There has been a time in our history when one of our leaders thought that money wasn't a problem, it was how to spend it. Just gives you the mindset of leadership we've had to contend with. So because we thought we had enough money, even though my honest view is, even if there was no corruption in Nigeria, the oil money we had was never enough. because you had a teeming population where infrastructure is not world class, where you need education, where you need health system, where you need almost anything you can conceive. Even electricity alone is enough to tell us that we didn't plan well as a nation. Humanly, if you look at the way people behave, and this is not that Nigerian people are just bad people, it's anywhere in the world. Whenever there are no consequences for things you do or things you fail to do, human beings do things that are convenient for them. It just so happens that paying taxes is not convenient. So if there are no consequences for not paying it, then the average human being would not pay. So you have companies, and it's a simple question. We can say informal sector is difficult to track because you don't know who they are, you don't have data. But companies, these are registered with government. Government register each and every one of them with addresses, name of directors, and then we now say they are not in the tax net. And then you're asking yourself, were you not the one that registered them? People buy vehicles. You can't drive your car on the road without registering it with the state. Even property, you buy land, you need the state to do the property transfer. Majority of what people do today, the information is with government, either directly or indirectly. Is government not doing anything with the information? And in some cases, you have different agencies that duplicate roles. You have manual processes, you have extreme bureaucracies, and all of these things point into one direction. They provide avenue for corruption, for leakages, for wastage. So you even find that even within the tax system itself, the way it's being designed is such that the money you pay does not get to government. So whenever you hear the report, it's a GDP tax ratio is very low, it's 5%, it's 3%. It's all of these things that are actually contributing towards that. So Nigeria needs to really, really think differently. It's in our interest of everybody in Nigeria who is patriotic and is a citizen of the country for us to do things differently. It's just so certain and obvious that the way we have been doing things is not, we can't continue like that. It won't get us anywhere.
Definitely we can't continue. Looking at even the issues around the economy, our inflation rate as at the last time was 16.5%, and other issues around the dwindling, the dollar to naira issue, which the CBN has been trying to battle. We came up with the flexible exchange rate. You know, I want us to move a little bit into the economic issues now. And just yesterday, the Bankers Committee have come again to say they're going to increase sales of dollars to the Bureau de change operators. Now, how do we restabilize this economy? Even like you talked about the presidential dialogue, the vice president was talking about injecting some funds into the work, spa and all that, just trying to reactivate this economy. But it seems not to be. The common man on the street still needs to have food on his table for him to understand, or he doesn't want to know what the inflation is saying, he doesn't want to know the figures. How do we really get this right at this time?
Yeah, I have my own views on all of these issues. I think fundamentally there are things we have to do. And we have to do those things like yesterday. So if you take the fact that this economy relies a lot on public sector spending, which is abnormal. Normally, private sector should be the engine room, but too many sectors rely on government. Maybe that's not supposed to be a big problem, but the issue is we have been very slow in releasing funds. First, it took us forever to approve the budget. After the budget was approved, we were not releasing funds. What you needed to do is release funds. In fact, when countries are going through a recession, they look for projects they don't need, like constructing a bridge where there's no water, just so you can create activities, generate employment, and stimulate the economy. We have been very slow in releasing funds. That's one. The other thing is about the foreign exchange policy. So you said it's floating. Some of us have a bit of reservation that it's not entirely floating. And the other part, the other reason why it's not entirely floating is you have suppressed demand. And because you still have the 41 items that are prohibited. Now, these 41 items, if you talk to the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, they'll tell you it's about 500 items. So you just bucket them into 41. Once you do that, what you do is you create a demand in the parallel market without a corresponding supply of FX. And because of that gap between demand and supply of FX, you're going to have a higher rate at the parallel market than you have in the official market, whether you call it interbank or not. And the more gap you create, the more the incentive for people to round trip. People get the dollar from the official market and they go and resell in the parallel market. Now, because of all of this as well, the international market is very, very knowledgeable. They know that what you're doing is still not what you should be doing. So they're still holding back. So diaspora remittances is not coming as it should. Foreign portfolio investors are holding back. Foreign direct investment is not flowing until you get to a point where you create the confidence in the system and the money start flowing, diaspora remittances, FDI, FPI, and that will in itself create the liquidity we are looking for beyond oil. So that creates liquidity in the system, and because of the liquidity in the system, Naira would appreciate. When Naira appreciates because we are import dependent, inflation will go down. So this whole idea of let's increase MPR so that people can invest in Nigeria does not make a lot of sense to me. Because if inflation is somewhere around almost 17%, and you make MPR 14%, the real return is still negative. I don't see anybody bringing their money in. Plus, if you bring the money in dollars, you convert to Naira. You're not sure where Naira is going tomorrow. Yeah. If Naira devalues further, you lose 1/3 of your investment in a couple of weeks. So everybody is still holding back. Those are the issues we must fix and fix very urgently.
I'm also worried we're in recession. Yes, recession. The minister said technically in recession. But many have approved that, many have agreed that we are looking at where we stand at the moment. Even the results are dwindling by the day. You know, this issue of recession is also worrisome. At the moment, South Africa has overtaken us when it comes to economic GDP and all that. This is because of the dollar, the exchange rate. That's why they are above us at the moment. I want your thoughts. I want to feel your thoughts on that. What do you think? Some say because South Africa is more industrialized, and why did they just take over us that way?
Yeah, I think, you know, if I start with the recession thing, so it's not extraordinary to be in recession. It's a question of knowing why you got into it and get out of it very quickly. So the natural principle is that it's easier and faster to fall than it is to rise. But you need to first stop the falling and then push your way back up. And that's going to require a whole lot of things, including macroeconomic policies, be they monetary, fiscal policies, industrial policies, a lot of things. My view is that in solving Nigeria's problem, we don't need a lot of money to solve it. More than half of the problem will be solved by policies. Policies don't require a lot of money. If you fix policies, you know what? Even private sector will do infrastructure. They will construct roads. They will do airport. They will do seaports. But if the policies are not clear, people will not do it. Now, South Africa, Nigeria, I have my own different view as to whether indeed South Africa has overtaken us. I don't think it's something you just wake up one day, take the GDP as at the end of 2015, divide by exchange rates, compare with Rand, and say South Africa is ahead of us. Both economies have part of their GDP that is dollar denominated. And those dollar-denominated sectors don't decline because of exchange rate of dollar to the local currency. Like our oil sector is still about 10–13%. And a lot of the income there is dollar-denominated, so which means they haven't lost value like the other sectors. So I think that it's just about looking at it from that point of view. From that point of view,
policies indeed. I must thank you so much, Taiwo Oyedele, Partner Head of Tax and Regulatory Services, PricewaterhouseCoopers, for insight into these issues around tax policy and also facing the Nigerian economy as a whole. I must thank you for joining us on Business Nigeria. Well, that's our wrap today on Business Nigeria. Thanks for watching. On behalf of the entire production crew, I say my name is Tolu Lokwe Ogunjobi. Join us again next time for a fresh edition. Bye for now.